911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I need the police right now. There's a man refusing to move out of a property my son is entitled to. He won't leave, and he's causing distress to our community, the woman snapped, her voice sharp and entitled. That woman was Karen. She stood right at the edge of my ranch driveway, dressed like she owned the whole county, phone pressed tightly to her ear while glaring at my front porch. I stood just behind my screen door, arms folded, boots planted firm on the wooden floorboards. I heard her words as clear as day. She didn't even try to whisper. She had the nerve to call 911 to demand that I, the rightful owner of this ranch for 15 years, get removed because her son deserved the land more. Her son? A grown man who couldn't even mow his own yard, let alone handle 60 acres of cattle, fencing, and irrigation systems. And she said I was causing a disturbance? I stared, waiting, not speaking a word. My German Shepherd, Duke, stood beside me, tail low and growling softly. Karen's eyes locked onto mine through the mesh screen, her phone still pressed to her face as she said the line that made my stomach turn. Yes, officer, please hurry. My son has plans to develop this land. We're with the HOA and he needs it now. This squatter won't leave. Squatter? My hands clenched at my sides. She had crossed a line, and she didn't even know the kind of storm she just invited. Because the moment she made that call, she set off a chain of events that not even the HOA could control. But that wasn't the shocking part. Not yet. The real shock? The moment the cops actually showed up, sirens, lights, everything, and started walking toward me. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a nosy neighbor or a bad day. This was war. It all started 3 months ago when I decided to retire early and move full-time to my ranch in Oak Ridge Hills, a quiet semi-rural community just outside Phoenix. I had inherited the property from my uncle, a hard-working rancher who taught me everything about land, livestock, and integrity. The land was big, peaceful, with a wraparound porch, a vegetable garden, and a few old barns I'd slowly started fixing up. It was heaven to me. My nearest neighbor was a half-mile away. At least, that's how it used to be. Then came Karen. She moved into the neighborhood with her 28-year-old son, Chad, and everything changed. I noticed them first when I caught Chad trying to fish in my private pond. When I politely asked him to leave, Karen stormed down the gravel road and accused me of being unneighborly. I explained, firmly but kindly, that the pond was on private land, my land. I even showed her the boundary markers. But she didn't care. That same week, she tried to claim that my fencing was 2 feet too far to the west, even though the markers had been set by a licensed surveyor. I'm with the HOA, she'd said, holding up a laminated card like it was some kind of badge, and we'll need to talk about your compliance. I reminded her my property wasn't under the HOA's jurisdiction. It was clearly exempt. The paperwork said so. My uncle had opted out decades ago when the HOA was formed. Karen's eyes narrowed. That will need to change, she said, cold as a rattlesnake. I thought she'd give up after that. I really did. But every week something new came up. First she said my barn was too old and an eyesore. Then she said my rooster was too loud. Then she said the dust from my gravel drive was agitating her allergies. But the worst was when I found her son Chad in my barn. Inside my barn. He said he was just exploring. That's when I installed cameras. Every corner of the ranch. Front gate, back pastures, the barn, the garden, everything. And it turns out, that was the smartest thing I ever did. Because that call to 911, that wasn't just an empty threat. The day Karen stood outside my property and made that call, she wasn't bluffing. She was serious. She wanted me gone. She had convinced herself, and probably her son, that I didn't belong here, and they had more vision for this land than I ever could. When the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, I expected things to get sorted quickly, but I never expected what came next. The 2 officers walked slowly toward my porch. Karen smiled like she had just won a prize on a game show. Chad stood behind her, arms folded, looking smug. The taller officer approached. Are you Mr. Walker? Yes, sir, I replied. Calmly, respectfully. I had nothing to hide. We received a call regarding a property dispute, he said. The woman over there says you're living on land that doesn't belong to you. She said what? I blinked. She claims this property was promised to her family through an HOA transfer, he said, flipping through a notepad. I stepped forward, keeping my voice level. Sir, I have the title deed. The land's been in my family since 1979. I'm not under any HOA. They have no authority here. He raised a brow. Would you be willing to show me that documentation? Absolutely, I said, already walking inside to get my files. When I returned, I handed him the thick folder with every legal document needed. Title, tax records, exemption notice, even my uncle's original opt-out letter from the HOA. He flipped through it, nodding slowly. But just as he was about to speak, Karen yelled from the fence line. Don't let him fool you, that ranch is supposed to be ours. My son is a veteran. He deserves that land. Now that was a lie. Chad had never served a day in the military. The officer's jaw tightened. That's when things took a sharp turn, because Karen didn't stop there. No, she marched up the driveway, shoved the officer's shoulder, and pointed at me like I had committed a crime. You need to remove him right now, she screamed. He's not part of this community. My son has development plans. We need him gone. And the officer? He looked at me, then looked at her. Then he said something I'll never forget. Ma'am, step back and don't touch me again. But Karen, she wasn't done. She shouted one final sentence that changed everything. Then I'll file an emergency injunction with the HOA board and make sure you're evicted by Friday. I blinked. Evicted? From my own land? But just as I stepped off the porch to respond, Chad ran up to the officer, shouting, and swung a punch. The moment his fist flew, everything changed. And that's where this chapter ends. The punch connected, but not with the officer. Chad's fist caught the edge of the officer's radio instead, sending it clattering to the ground. The deputy barely flinched. In a flash, he grabbed Chad's arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him face first against the hood of the cruiser with one swift motion. The clank of metal cuffs snapped through the air like a whip. Hands where I can see them, the second officer shouted, stepping forward and placing himself between me and Karen. Karen screamed, Don't touch my son. He was only trying to make a point. Ma'am, back up now or you'll be joining him, the deputy barked, his voice calm but deadly serious. I stood frozen, heart racing. Duke let out a low, threatening growl behind me, sensing the tension. Chad, now red-faced and stunned, groaned. He stole our land. We're just taking back what's ours. The officer didn't answer. He finished cuffing him, then shoved him gently, but firmly, into the back seat of the cruiser. Karen ran toward the window, banging on it. Chatty, baby, don't say a word. Mommy's gonna fix this. But there was no fixing it, not after what had just happened. Still, I couldn't relax. Not yet. I knew Karen. This was just the beginning. Sure enough, the very next day, a letter arrived, delivered not by mail, but slipped under my gate. It was from the HOA board. Notice of inquiry. Due to recent community concerns, the Homeowners Association will be reviewing the legal boundaries and land use compliance of the property at 412 Ranch Hill Lane. Failure to cooperate may result in fines, legal notices, or emergency intervention. Emergency intervention? I shook my head in disbelief. They've lost their minds, I muttered. But I wasn't about to be bullied. I gathered every document I had and walked them straight down to the county land records office. I met with Mr. Branson, a gray-haired clerk who had been there since the 80s. He remembered my uncle, remembered the opt-out form. This HOA can't touch you, he confirmed. You're grandfathered out. Their boundaries end a quarter mile before your gate. Still, I asked for certified copies of everything. I wasn't just going to defend my land, I was going to expose this circus. That same week, I got an email from an old friend, Melanie, a local reporter I'd gone to school with back in Flagstaff. She had seen Karen's latest rant on a neighborhood app. "I think this might be a story," she wrote. "Do you mind if I come by with a camera crew?" I agreed. She showed up with a camera person and a drone. We filmed everything. My documents, my boundaries, even Karen's fake HOA badge she'd left on my porch during one of her nighttime visits. Caught on camera, of course. Melanie shook her head. "This woman's dangerous." "I know," I said, "but she's also smart. Smart enough to play victim when the law doesn't go her way." She nodded. "That's why we're going to air both sides. Truth always wins." I hoped she was right. 2 days after the interview aired on the local station, I started receiving emails from neighbors. Most of them apologized. "I had no idea you weren't part of the HOA. She told us you were trespassing. I'm sorry we believed her. We should have asked you directly." The tide was turning, but not for Karen. No. She doubled down. That same week, she posted a public HOA-wide announcement: "Urgent community action needed. Due to a dangerous squatter threatening our future development and community harmony, I am proposing an emergency neighborhood vote to forcefully absorb his land into our HOA and remove him by legal means. My son will then lead a sustainable housing project on the land to benefit all." She attached a photo of Chad smiling in a suit, taken years ago, clearly edited. It was pure madness. But here's the problem. Some people actually agreed with her. And that's when the real harassment started. The next morning, I woke up to find tire marks through my vegetable garden. My irrigation system had been slashed. One of my cows had wandered off through an opened gate. They were sending a message, but I wasn't backing down. I called the sheriff, showed him the footage, filed a report, and while he was kind, he admitted there wasn't much they could do yet. "They're pushing to get your land rezoned," he warned. "And if they succeed—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what it meant. I'd be forced to sell or face massive legal fees. But then something happened that changed everything. Something so petty, so Karen. She showed up at my gate again. But this time, she brought a moving truck. A real 20-foot rental truck with the name U-Store Move plastered on the side. She stood there, arms on hips, wearing a visor and waving a folder over her head like a flag. "I'm giving you until Sunday to vacate the house," she shouted over the rumble of the truck's engine. "My son is moving in. We've already spoken with the board." I laughed out loud. I had to, but she didn't find it funny. "You think this is a joke?" she snapped. "You're the joke. You're a parasite living on land that's too good for you." I walked down the porch steps, my boots crunching the gravel. "You brought a moving truck to my ranch?" I asked. She pointed to the house. "Enjoy your last 2 nights." I said nothing, but I turned, looked right at my security camera, and waved. Because I knew one thing she didn't. That truck wouldn't be moving anyone in, but it just might be towing someone out. The very next night, something happened that made even Karen scream for help. And it wasn't me. It was something, or someone else. Because when the alarms went off at 2:13 a.m. and floodlights lit up the front yard, a figure was caught on camera, crawling, digging, holding something long and shiny, and it was pointed straight at my barn. The floodlights flared so bright it was like daylight poured over the entire yard. My heart thumped hard in my chest as I jumped from bed and grabbed the remote for the security feed. Duke was already barking, pacing by the door, growling like a wild animal. I tapped the live feed. There, right in front of the barn, a man, in dark clothes, crawling on his belly like a soldier in a war movie. He held a long metal pipe in his hand, low to the ground, tapping and digging into the soil just beside the barn's side wall. I zoomed in. It was Chad, and he was trying to break into the underground water system, maybe to sabotage it, maybe worse. I didn't wait. I hit the panic button on the wall, one I had wired directly to the sheriff's department months ago. The alarm shrieked through the night, a piercing sound that echoed for miles. Duke went racing down the hallway to the front door, teeth bared. Within 10 minutes, squad cars rolled in, tires crushing gravel, red and blue lights bouncing off the barn's aluminum siding. Chad tried to run but tripped in the dark and fell face first into a trough of water. When they dragged him out, soaked and shivering, he started yelling like a child caught stealing candy. "I was checking the plumbing," he lied, sputtering. "You were holding a pipe wrench and a bag of nails," the officer snapped. "Try again." Karen came flying out of her house, still in her nightrobe and slippers, screaming like a banshee. "He was helping. This is our land. I warned him the system was leaking and he offered to fix it." "In the middle of the night?" the deputy asked, raising a brow. Karen hesitated, blinking. "It's urgent." They didn't buy it. The officers took Chad in for questioning, and this time they didn't let him off with a warning. But once again, Karen wasn't done. If anything, she was even more determined. The next morning, I woke up to find a massive wooden sign hammered into the edge of my property. "Future site of Chad's organic eco-community. Coming soon," I laughed. Then I ripped it out of the ground. But just when I thought the drama couldn't get more ridiculous, I received a letter that stopped me cold. It was from the county zoning office. Subject: Land Development Review Request. Pending HOA acquisition. I sat down, rereading the words. It seemed that Karen had filed an official petition with the county requesting that my land be reviewed for forced acquisition through eminent domain. That's when I realized this wasn't just about being nosy or entitled anymore. Karen was playing the long game, and if I didn't fight smart, I might actually lose my ranch. Not because she was right, but because she was relentless. I took a drive straight to the county office, files in hand, but when I arrived, I was told the zoning officer wasn't available. "She's in a meeting with members of the HOA," the receptionist said, with a forced smile. Of course she was. I left a message for her and went straight to Melanie's news station. "You need to run another story," I told her. She blinked. "Another one?" "She's trying to take the land through legal tricks. I have proof. Emails, letters, documents." Melanie looked at me and nodded. "All right, I'll run a follow-up, but this time we'll show the public what happens when HOAs go too far." The story aired 2 nights later. The ranch under siege, complete with footage of Karen's moving truck stunt, the 911 call, the barn break-in, and the sign. It went viral locally. But the fire really lit up when a group of anti-HOA advocates saw the clip and shared it on their national Facebook group. Overnight, I had over 10,000 people watching. Hundreds of messages poured in. "You're not alone. Fight back. We support you." My cousin lost her home to an HOA just like that. One message stood out. It came from a woman named Linda. She was a retired federal real estate lawyer from Nevada who now volunteered for property rights cases. Her message was simple: "Call me, I can help." I did. We spoke for hours. She offered to help me, for free. "This case is bigger than you," she said. "It's about setting a precedent." She drafted letters, filed a formal complaint with the county board, and even started prepping a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and attempted illegal seizure. I was hopeful. But Karen, she had other plans. 2 days after the news story aired, someone dumped a pile of dead chickens in my front yard. No note, no explanation, just 27 lifeless chickens rotting under the sun. I knew it wasn't random. I called the sheriff again, but this time they came with gloves, bags, and a warrant. They searched Chad's garage. They found feathers, blood-stained gloves, and security footage from a neighbor's doorbell cam showing him tossing something into the back of a pickup around 3 a.m. But while that helped my case, the event that happened next nearly undid everything. Because I came home one afternoon and found the front door of my ranch house wide open. Duke was gone, the kitchen was trashed, and someone had carved a word into my wooden dining table. Get out. The chill that ran down my spine wasn't from fear, it was from fury. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the deep, jagged letters carved into my dining table. Get out. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted to terrorize me. My hands shook, not from fear, but rage. I called for Duke. No bark, no sound. Just the eerie hum of silence stretching through my once peaceful ranch house. "Duke," I yelled, running out into the yard. I searched every corner of the land, behind the barn, near the chicken coops, through the vegetable garden, even down by the stream. Nothing. Panic started creeping in. What if they hurt him? What if he was dumped like those chickens? Then I heard it. A faint whimper from the tool shed. I rushed over, flung open the door, and there he was. Duke. Shaking, terrified, tied up with garden twine and locked inside. "Good boy," I whispered, kneeling down and cutting him free. He licked my hand, tail wagging weakly. Someone had broken into my home, wrecked my kitchen, left a threat, and tied up my dog like garbage. That wasn't just petty anymore. That was a crime. I called the sheriff immediately. Deputies arrived within 20 minutes. They documented everything, took photos of the table, dusted for prints, inspected the tool shed. "This is no longer civil harassment," one of them said. "This is felony trespass, breaking and entering, criminal damage, and possible animal abuse." But even with that, I knew the gears of justice turned slowly. Karen had become emboldened. She believed the law wouldn't touch her. She still walked around the neighborhood like she was a queen in a crown made of delusion, waving to people, hosting HOA brunches, smiling in pictures with her son while he sat under house arrest. That week, Melanie aired a second follow-up story. The footage of Duke whimpering in the shed, filmed on my phone, was included. And that image? It did something the legal papers and the angry neighbors couldn't. It broke the internet. Thousands of people shared it. Animal rights groups reposted it with hashtags like Justice for Duke and Show Hell. The sheriff's department got pressure from activists. The county board received over 100 official complaints. My story was picked up by a regional newspaper, and a segment even ran on a national morning show. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just the local neighborhood tyrant. She was America's HOA Karen, and she hated it. 3 nights after the national story aired, I heard banging at my gate around 11 p.m. I checked the camera. It was her, hair wild, slippers on, a flashlight in one hand and a thick envelope in the other. I didn't open the gate. I just turned on the speaker. "You need to stop this madness," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You've humiliated me. My son can't get a job now. People are threatening us online." "That's not my fault," I said flatly. "You brought that on yourself." "I'm giving you one last chance," she hissed. "Take this offer. Sell the land. Quietly. I even had a contract drawn up." She held the envelope up to the camera. I almost laughed. "You think I'd sell you this land after all you've done?" I asked. "It's more money than it's worth," she snapped. I leaned closer to the mic. "Then go buy land somewhere else." She screamed, an actual scream, and threw the envelope at the gate. The next day, my lawyer friend Linda sent me an urgent message. Karen had filed another claim, this time claiming emotional damage. She said my dog had menaced her and that I had been recording her without consent from inside my own home. Linda reassured me it was laughable, but she warned me. "She's digging for anything. Be ready. This woman is desperate." But what none of us were ready for was what she did next. 1 week later, during a community HOA meeting, Karen stood up and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. "My son has decided to run for HOA president, and if elected, we will be annexing the ranch into the HOA officially. We'll vote it in. And if necessary, we'll file with the city to redraw the jurisdiction lines." There was some gasping, some applause, some awkward clapping. But most people were stunned silent. She smiled sweetly, like she had just delivered the punchline to a joke. I was watching the meeting from the live stream link that someone from the neighborhood had sent me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was going to run the HOA, and once she was inside, she planned to rewrite the rules. Linda called immediately. "She can't do that, not legally. But if she wins that seat, She can make your life 10 times harder in the meantime. We need a plan, I said. And that plan came the very next morning. I decided it was time to go on the offensive. I started gathering statements from other neighbors, those who had been quietly intimidated by Karen for years but were too afraid to speak up. One man, George, confessed that Karen once fined him $500 for planting non-HOA approved flowers near his mailbox, when he wasn't even in the HOA. Another woman, Lisa, said Karen tried to tow her car for blocking a sidewalk that didn't exist. I created a public online folder titled HOA Karen Files, The Truth About Oak Ridge Hills. I uploaded every piece of evidence I had: videos, screenshots, legal documents, and even anonymous testimonies. I shared the link with a private group of neighbors. Within 48 hours, the folder had over 3,000 views. People started speaking out, and just when it seemed like the truth was finally winning, someone broke into my barn again. This time, they set fire to a pile of dry hay near the back wall. If I hadn't checked the cameras early, if the sprinklers hadn't triggered in time, I would have lost everything. The fire was still smoldering when the fire department arrived. Flames hadn't consumed the barn, thank God, but the damage was real. Black scorch marks lined the back wall. A pile of charred hay and melted plastic buckets smoked in the corner. My tractor's tires had started to bubble from the heat. The firefighter in charge pulled off his helmet and shook his head. If this had happened an hour later, we'd be dealing with a full structure collapse. I didn't need to guess who did it, but for once I didn't say anything. I just showed them the footage. The camera above the barn had caught it all. A figure in a hoodie sneaking in, carrying a red plastic gas can. He poured the fuel on the hay, struck a match, and ran. The flame caught fast. The camera angle wasn't perfect. The hoodie covered most of the face. But the sneakers? The walk? The limp on the left foot? It was Chad. The deputy on scene looked grim. This isn't just harassment anymore, this is attempted arson. That night I sat on the porch watching the sky shift from dusk to black, wondering how far this was going to go. And then it happened. At exactly 8:30 p.m., my security system buzzed with a new alert. Someone was at the front gate again. I checked the monitor. Karen, holding a stack of papers, alone this time. I didn't go outside. Instead, I turned on the intercom again. I just wanted to deliver something, she said, her voice calm. Too calm. I said nothing. She pushed the papers through the mail slot in the gate and walked away. I waited until she disappeared down the road before retrieving them. They weren't legal documents. They were flyers, printed sheets with my face on them labeled Dangerous Ranch Squatter, Threat to the Community. Below that it read, Refuses to cooperate with HOA, aggressive, records people, owns an attack dog, will not leave. Community meeting scheduled to discuss eviction strategy. My jaw dropped. She had made dozens of these flyers. There were copies stuffed in the back. I found some already posted on trees near the road by the morning. I took them all down. That was the final straw. The next morning I sent every document, every image, every video, everything, to Linda and the sheriff's department. And this time, they acted fast. Within 48 hours, a restraining order was filed against both Karen and Chad. They were no longer legally allowed to approach within 200 feet of my property. Chad was formally charged with attempted arson. They couldn't prove it was him 100%, but the evidence was overwhelming enough to trigger court proceedings. He was placed under a no-contact bond. Karen, however, doubled down again. She didn't just fight the restraining order, she held a rally at the HOA clubhouse. Yes, a rally, complete with banners like, Take Back Our Land, and Vote Chad for HOA President. Melanie's camera crew went again. She tried to confront Karen, asking her why she was continuing this vendetta. Karen laughed. Because he doesn't belong here, she said on tape. My family helped build this community. This land was meant for families, not lone cowboys living in the past. The quote went viral. Again. Lone cowboy started trending, and people began turning against Karen in droves. Even members of the HOA board, who had once been silent, started distancing themselves. One even showed up at my door. Her name was Denise, late 50s, kind eyes. She brought a pie, believe it or not. "I just want you to know," she said nervously. "Not all of us are with her. She bullied her way into the board. We're holding an emergency vote to remove her." I didn't say much, just nodded and thanked her. But inside I was already preparing for the next move. Because while Karen was losing popularity publicly, she was still dangerous, especially now that her pride was cracked. And then it happened. One afternoon I returned from the feed store and found something new in my mailbox, a certified envelope from the county development office. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a notice, cold, clinical, and terrifying. Notice of intent to condemn property for community rezoning, subject to HOA request. My knees went weak. They were trying to condemn my ranch. It wasn't final, not yet. But if approved, it meant the county could force me to sell the land, at a price they determined, and Karen could finally get her grubby hands on it through her son's eco-housing vision. They were using the law against me now. Not petty flyers, not slashed fences, not threats. The system. I called Linda, panicked. She was calm. "This is what I was afraid of," she said. "But we'll fight it. Condemnation doesn't happen overnight. We've got a few weeks to gather signatures, protest, file injunctions, and bring media heat." "Just tell me what to do," I said. She laid out a battle plan. We'd get signatures from residents, use the footage of the barn fire, file a countersuit, demand an emergency halt on the rezoning attempt, and most importantly, we'd expose every single dirty trick Karen had pulled. But time was ticking, and as the fight intensified, I got another shock. A neighbor named Mike stopped by one evening, hat in hand. He looked nervous. "Listen," he said, "I probably should have told you this weeks ago." "What is it?" He sighed. "Karen's been offering money. Bribes. She tried to pay me to lie on an affidavit, said you attacked Chad, said she'd cover my HOA fees for a year." My eyes narrowed. "You serious?" He nodded. I said no, but I think she found someone else who said yes. That night I checked the county court system's online portal, and there it was, a false affidavit filed by a man I'd never even met, claiming I had physically threatened HOA members and had a history of violence. They were building a case of lies, and unless I tore it down fast, I could lose everything. That night I stared out over the land I'd bled to keep, my uncle's land, my home, and I swore to myself I would not lose this ranch to Karen. But then, at sunrise the next morning, I woke to the sound of sirens again. Only this time, they weren't coming to stop Karen. They were coming for me. Red and blue lights danced across my living room walls as I stepped outside in a daze, barefoot, shirt barely buttoned. 2 sheriff cruisers, 1 unmarked car, and a white county vehicle lined my gravel driveway. I raised both hands as the deputies stepped out. "Mr. Walker," one of them said, not yelling, just formal. "We need to speak with you." "Am I under arrest?" I asked, heart hammering in my chest. "Not at this time, but you've been named in an affidavit submitted with the zoning dispute. We're here to serve an emergency cease and desist and issue a temporary injunction on any further construction or land development activities on this property." I blinked. "What construction?" They exchanged looks. "The HOA submitted photos and witness statements saying you were digging trenches for new structures without permits." "I'm fixing an irrigation ditch," I shouted. "I've been maintaining that system since before some of these HOA board members were born." The deputy sighed. "I believe you, but with this new claim in the county file, the court has to respond." I took the papers from him, stamped across the top in bold, "Temporary land freeze, effective immediately." Karen had done it. She'd weaponized the law, again. That night I couldn't sleep. Duke lay beside the bed, his head on my foot. The house was silent. Too silent. I was staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed at 2:11 a.m. It was a text. Melanie, check the HOA live stream right now. I pulled up the link, and what I saw made my jaw drop. Karen, standing at the HOA clubhouse podium, speaking to a room full of sleepy but present neighbors. A huge banner hung behind her. Vote yes to annex Ranch Hill Lane. She wasn't just trying to take my land anymore. She wanted to absorb the entire road into HOA control, claiming it had fallen into disrepair and needed regulation for the community's safety. Then she said something that nearly made me throw the phone. My son and I will personally fund the first development phase. We're building a model home on the Walker property. The structure will begin by the end of next month, once we've cleared the squatters. Squatters. She was standing there, smiling, and telling lies on camera. Again. The next morning, I met with Linda on a video call. She was already way ahead of me. I've filed for an injunction against the land freeze, she said. We're gathering signatures from all non-HOA residents on Ranch Hill Lane. We have 27 already. But what about the false affidavit? We'll challenge it. It'll take time, but we'll prove it's fabricated. For now, you need to stay calm. Stay legal. Don't let them bait you. I nodded. But staying calm became impossible that evening, because that's when I saw the bulldozer. It was parked right outside my gate. Huge, yellow, freshly painted, with a note pinned to the seat. Coming soon, the new Chad estate. I lost it. I drove straight to the HOA clubhouse, still packed with members from their fake emergency meeting, and I demanded to speak. At first, Karen laughed. Why should we let a squatter speak at our meeting? But the crowd wasn't laughing. In fact, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Doubt, guilt, regret. Denise, the board member who once brought me that pie, stood and cleared her throat. Let him speak. He owns that land. Whether we like him or not, he deserves 5 minutes. So I walked up to the podium. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the table. I told them everything. I told them about my uncle, about how long this land had been in my family, about Karen's flyers, her fake contracts, the trespassing, the arson, the threats, the dog, the lies. I ended by saying, this isn't about HOA rules anymore. This is about power, about one woman trying to rewrite history for her own selfish gain. But I won't go quietly, and I'm not alone. Then I held up a folder, full of statements from neighbors who had also been harassed by Karen. One by one, people started standing. First Lisa, then George, then a man named Travis who I barely knew. They shared their own stories. And just like that, the mood shifted. Karen stood to respond, but people began walking out. She screamed, "You're all ungrateful. You don't see what I'm building." But no one was listening. The next morning, we filed our final motion, a legal request to block the annexation vote and call for an investigation into the HOA's misuse of power. But that same day, Karen made her most unhinged move yet. She showed up with a U-Haul. Yes. Again. Only this time, she didn't park it outside the gate. She drove it through the gate, tore it clean off the hinges. Duke went wild. I came running out as the U-Haul skidded to a stop in front of my house. Karen jumped out, face red, screaming, "You were warned!" Behind her, Chad, with a sledgehammer. Before I could even react, he charged toward the barn. Chad ran at full speed toward the barn, sledgehammer raised like he was storming a castle. The barn door stood no chance. One blow, just one, and the aged wooden frame splintered apart. He let out a wild yell as he tore through, knocking over hay bales, slamming the hammer into support beams like a madman. "Get off my land," I shouted, sprinting across the yard. Duke was barking furiously behind me, but I kept him back with a sharp command. I didn't want him hurt. Karen stood beside the still-running U-Haul, grinning. Not like she was angry anymore, but like she'd snapped. "This is ours now," she shouted over the engine noise. "The board voted. You're done." But I had already pulled out my phone. I'd stop if I were you, Chad, I said calmly, pointing the camera at him. You're live. He hesitated, but only for a second. Then he laughed, an unhinged, almost childish sound, and drove the sledgehammer into the side of my tractor. It dented loudly. That was it. I turned around and walked inside, not to hide, to push the second panic button, the one hardwired not to the local sheriff, but to the state troopers and fire department. Karen wanted drama. She was about to get the final act. Sirens screamed down Ranch Hill Lane within minutes. Not just local police this time, troopers, a fire truck, and, bless them, a news van following close behind. Apparently, someone on the neighborhood app had started filming Karen's stunt and tipped off the press. Karen and Chad froze as the troopers stepped out with calm authority. Hands where we can see them, the lead trooper said. What for? Karen shrieked. He's the one who… You've driven a vehicle through a private gate onto private property. That's felony trespassing, destruction of property, and potentially assault, the officer replied without blinking. Now step away from the vehicle. Chad didn't move. Karen stepped toward the officer, finger wagging. My son is building affordable eco-homes. This man is a criminal squatter. My son is an entrepreneur. The officer just tilted his head. Is that your son over there? He asked. Karen nodded proudly. The officer looked toward the barn. Because he's on camera destroying your neighbor's property with a deadly weapon. Karen's jaw dropped. Chad realized too late. 2 troopers moved in, cuffing him right there in front of everyone. Karen screamed and tried to follow, but they blocked her path. Then came the final blow. The news crew stepped forward and turned the camera on Karen as she shouted into the night, "This is our community. You'll see. You'll all see." And that became the lead story by morning. HOA president's son arrested in ranch takeover gone wrong. The footage was everywhere. Karen's madness, Chad's rampage, the moment troopers pulled the sledgehammer out of his hands. Linda moved fast. Within the week, the county permanently dismissed the annexation request. The HOA board, what was left of it, called an emergency meeting to vote Karen out of her leadership position. She showed up, tried to plead, blamed stress, blamed manipulation, but the vote was unanimous. She was stripped of all HOA power, banned from holding any position of authority in the neighborhood again. And the court? They granted me a full protective order. Karen and Chad were legally forbidden from stepping within 500 feet of me, my land, or any of my property. Chad was charged with felony destruction, breaking and entering, and resisting arrest. He pled guilty to avoid jail time, but received a massive fine, probation, and mandatory therapy. Karen? She disappeared for a while. The U-Haul was impounded. The flyers stopped. And the HOA members? They quietly started cleaning up the mess. Some came to apologize. Others brought cookies. George even helped rebuild my gate. As for me, I rebuilt the barn with stronger wood, better locks, and reinforced fencing around the perimeter. Melanie ran a final follow-up story titled, "The Ranch That Wouldn't Fall." It aired on local and national TV. A quiet man defending his land against a wild HOA Karen who thought she could control everything. I became a bit of a folk hero, not because I fought back, but because I did it without becoming like her. And Duke? He became the honorary mascot for HOA survivors across the country. Someone even made a meme. Duke says, "Not today, Karen." But the best moment came a month later. I got a letter in the mail from the county zoning board. No action will be taken against your property. Your legal ownership has been verified and recorded with permanent immunity from future HOA oversight. I framed it and mounted it above the new fireplace in the barn. Sometimes neighbors still drive by slowly, peeking through the trees, wondering if the rumors were true. Yes, they are. HOA. Karen really did call 911 to try and make me move out of my own ranch because she thought her son needed it. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just a rancher, I was a fighter, and this land? It wasn't just soil and fences. It was home.